The Red Wedding is such a memorable moment where tragedy befell the entire wedding. It burns into your memory after seeing it. But it was a fictional story that happened in a fantasy world. But sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. Or maybe the truth is just a little bit different. But that difference makes it seem even more strange. The mysterious story today is a deadly one, just like the Red Wedding. And it really happened. In 1867, in Italy, a princess was marrying a prince. Princess Maria Vittoria Carlotta Enriqueta Giovanna del Pozzo was marrying Prince Amedeo of Savoy. What a dream, right? Marrying a prince. But things took a turn from there. Before the wedding, the princess put a maid in charge of the wedding gown, making sure it was extra gowny or something like that. But surprisingly, she was later found hanged. So the princess needed a new gown. And a maid too, I guess. On the way to the chapel, a colonel in charge of the marriage procession. Prince and princesses need a fabulous entourage after all. But the colonel in charge of the parade collapsed from sunstroke in the middle of it. Everything ran into a stop. Until, I guess, princesses have colonel backups. And, well, they got a new colonel. And the parade continued until they ended up being stuck in front of the city gate. They knocked at it and sweated out in the sun, the bride and groom, until they found out that the gatekeeper had died mysteriously. So now they had to find a new gatekeeper. My, the mysterious injuries just keep on piling up, and the wedding wasn't even over yet. Finally, the bride and groom and all their guests could relax inside the chapel as the ceremony finally started up. But all the excitement wasn't over yet. During the wedding, the best man fired a gun for some unknown reason. This did happen in the 1800s sometimes, so maybe that kind of thing was more common then? I don't know. Or maybe royalty just does things that are hard to understand for people who don't carry around pistols at weddings. Thankfully, the priest did not spontaneously combust, and the flower girl did not start walking in circles, and the prince and princess were finally married. They left the chapel, hopeful that the strange occurrences were over and they were looking forward to their honeymoon. And so them and all their guests headed toward the train station to travel away and try to recover from all that had happened. However, this story is not over yet. As the train started approaching, the train station master fell onto the tracks. After everything that had happened up until this point, one of the guests, the king, decided to skip the train and escape using the carriages everyone had arrived in. Hopefully, safely. Reminds me of some horror movies where everyone tries to run out for the car. However, the chaos had not ended yet. As the carriages rushed away, the Count of Castellone fell onto his horse and was crushed by the bridal carriage itself. Now, let's go ahead and add up the casualties so far. We have the maid. We have the colonel who had heat stroke. We also have the gatekeeper. We also have a best man who shot off a gun, but there was no injury that I could find for that. There was a marriage official who had some kind of seizure. I did not include that in the story because we were getting kind of overboard at that point, but in the original telling, one of the government officials in charge of, I guess, certifying the wedding had some kind of fit or seizure. Then we have the station master who fell onto the tracks. And finally, we have the count. That gives us 7 so far odd occurrences or injuries or deaths from this one wedding. And that was the end of the wedding nightmare. This seems so confusing, but there are a few explanations to how or why these unfortunate events happened. And let's begin. You decide. First explanation is that all of the misfortune was over-exaggerated or did not even occur at all. Sometimes people like to tell a good story, so they add a little to something that is otherwise ordinary to make it seem more exciting. While this is possible, there are sources from the time period that this occurred in that say that all or the majority of all these tragedies did occur. It's also hard to cover up a death of a count, but All these deaths or injuries seem so unrealistic to happen purely by chance. Which brings us to our next possibility that this cursed wedding was not a curse or coincidence at all, but instead, some part of it was instigated or orchestrated, kind of like the fictional Red Wedding. Nobility in history do not usually marry for love, but instead for money or political power. The fairy tale princess in our story was from a very wealthy family, and she was set to inherit all of it. Spain at this time was also having a series of uprisings that eventually ended up leading to the Glorious Revolution, where the Queen of Spain ended up being replaced by none other than our darling prince in our story. So could there have been an interest in stopping this wedding that would change the power structure of Spain? It's even possible that the current monarch of Spain, the queen that was later removed, was perhaps viewing our prince as some kind of rival to the throne, which indeed he ended up being. I would say that this is possible, but I have no evidence of this being the case. Perhaps more research needs to be looked into this topic. The other option is that our bride and groom, our fairy tale prince and princess, were more like an evil queen or king or a horrible boss. Perhaps they overworked their servants and staff, like the maid and colonel, in their preparations for the ceremony. After all, getting married is already stressful enough. Never mind when you're dealing with European royalty. Maybe these people all got stressed to the point of causing injury. Nobility during this time period did not have a good reputation for being kind to their employees, and bridezillas are still a thing today. Perhaps our dear princess was just so extra with her demands that she drove people to terrible, terrible ends. And perhaps even the station master with the train was so worked up from the stress and that is why he ended up on the tracks. Perhaps even the best man, who was a member of the nobility himself, but perhaps even he was so nervous over this humongous event that he ended up firing his pistol. And the Count of Castellone fell from his horse, and so he's perhaps also suffering from heat stroke after the responsibilities from the long, long day. Now, the final explanation was that this wedding was indeed cursed, and that the powers in the universe brought about a profound negativity to the ceremony. The marriage did not appear to be a very happy one, from all the information that I could find about it online. The princess eventually became queen consort of Spain, and during that time wrote an official letter to her husband, the king, about his many affairs, and his response was to tell her that she had no right to control his behavior. She also died young, even for the standards of the day. At 29, their reign of Spain did not stay on the plane, but also only lasted a few years. So perhaps this series of unfortunate events was just the gods giving a warning. Or perhaps not. What do you think? Does one of these explanations seem to fit? Or maybe it is a combination of all? You decide. Let me know in the comments. And until then, ta-ta, my lovelies.